Today's topic will be the role of the data fabric in your target state architecture. In the session today, we're going to cover off how to eliminate point-to-point integration to cut build time and your budgets in half, how to use a data fabric to reuse data across new solutions, similar to the way that your APIs allow you to reuse code and architect your systems, to enable schema evolution and future-proof your platforms moving forward.
As Joanne mentioned, this is the first in a series. So we're going to be covering different topics on different weeks. Today, it's going to be introducing the concept of a data fabric and looking at it from a solution architect's perspective in terms of where does it fit in my enterprise architecture. We all have target state architectures. Data fabric is pretty new. There's lots of hype, lots of confusion around that. What is the impact to my organization beyond the scope of a single project? So that's going to be the theme of today. And in future sessions, we'll go deeper into a number of topics like autonomous data, granular controls, and auto data governance. And there's a lot of really interesting topics that we're going to be going ever deeper on. So I am hoping that you're getting value out of these sessions, and if so, then I encourage you to tell others about it, as well as make sure to join. And Joanne also mentioned that these sessions are being recorded. So if in the event that you miss one, we'll make sure that everyone's able to watch it at your convenience and leisure. So let me jump in. So just really quickly about me. So I'm Dan. I'm the CEO and co-founder. My background is in financial services prior to founding Cinchi. We've been in market now for about 2 years. And we're a scaling startup. We did our Series A in the middle of May, and we're growing pretty fast and furious. And but my background is essentially living the life of who ultimately buys our platform today, which is working in enterprise IT. I was working in some pretty big banks. I spent 11 years at Citigroup, for example, in capital markets, technology, building front office, middle office, and back office. Pretty complicated systems, and that's where had visibility into a single organization spending billions of dollars on integration on a continual basis, and that's why I'm here now doing what I'm doing, and that's why we created the platform. So the world that I'm used to is one where technology looks like this, and you're playing the game of Where's Waldo in order to find your data, and that's a universal challenge for everyone, be you in IT or on the business side. And it's been this way for a very, very long time. If you think about a data fabric, first of all, data fabrics are pretty new, but they're getting a lot of traction. If you follow Gartner and Forrester and G2 and Trust Radius and other industry analysts, there's a whole lot of hype around that. It's like peak of the hype cycle. But there's, with that, there's often lots of confusion. If you think back to when data lakes were new and exciting, how much confusion there is. There's still some confusion today over them, but if you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different interpretations on what that is. The way to think about it is it's really designed off of how your brain works as a let's say a role model, a muse for the design of it. And our brains are amazing machines. Each of our brains is managing more data than the biggest company on the planet, which is incredible because it's a nice, small, efficient form factor. And for me, one of the most interesting aspects of this is that every time you're learning something new, whether you're a baby learning to walk or talk, or your brain's actually reorganizing itself. It's forming new connections. It's not just adding. There's a finite amount of space. You can't just continuously add storage. So it's reorganizing, and that reorganization continues as you learn, as you acquire new life experiences. And there's a recent study that concluded that individuals with higher IQ actually have fewer connections between neurons, meaning the efficiency of their neural network is related to their intelligence. And if you think about that, imagine if the brain couldn't reorganize data. Imagine how limited that would leave us. We're talking about the difference between a newborn child and a fully mature adult in terms of intellectual capability. So this is a huge phenomena that really hasn't ever been tapped in an enterprise context, because the way that we've architected systems just doesn't allow for that evolution of schema. Our data sits inside of application data stores in rigid data models that are brittle. You can't change them. You can't even do something as simple as rename a column without breaking a bunch of things. So we learn very quickly. And I remember early in my career, you add, you work around, you don't change, you don't refactor, even within an application data model, let alone across the enterprise. But what a data fabric is doing is it's really unlocking the potential for the schema to evolve. And why that's a big deal is because enabling the schema evolution is really the only way to unblock true intelligence for the enterprise. So think of it as big companies are essentially have the intellectual capability of a baby, but now they can start to grow and mature and learn and reorganize. And that's the secret of a data fabric. That's why a lot of people are hyped up about it. That's why there's a lot of traction and interest and also confusion about that. But it does represent a major shift. The problem that it's ultimately solving is that applications are, we live in a world where there's an app for everything. There's a database for every app. Apps lead to fragmentation. The fragmentation of data leads to integration, and integration is what causes all this complexity. And if you look through history, complexity ain't a good thing. Often when there's something new and exciting, you're adding new capabilities, and with that come complexity and you get benefits. But it reaches a pivot point where those benefits start to turn against you. And there's some interesting theories if people want to learn more about it. Just Google Joseph Tainter. But it talks about how the ever growth in complexity ultimately causes entire societies to collapse, and has done so many times in the past. So we have to be a little bit careful. Like, are we at that inflection point? And one of the reasons why I left the world of finance IT is because I felt like that we were past that point, and needed to start to simplify. Just as an example, every company that I've ever been a part of and talking to our customers, half of the entire IT budget for change projects is spent on integration. And that's huge. That's a huge tax. It's a ball and chains. That's a hefty price to pay. And it doesn't go away. It just continues. So if you look at the industry analyst view, as I mentioned, there's a lot of hype about this. Gartner, as an example, they just published the updated hype cycles on the future of data, the future of applications, and data fabrics actually right at the peak on both of those. So a lot of interest, a lot of desire to automate data integration, data preparation, data cleaning, like all the impediments, all the barriers that really slow down pretty much everything that every organization is going to do, because again, it's limiting that enterprise intelligence. A common question is what is the relationship between a data fabric and data virtualization? The way to think of it, because data virtualization is definitely maturing. It itself is not even that old as a category and a concept, but it is maturing. But the way to think of that is virtualization is the VR version of what a data fabric brings to life. It makes it the actual reality. So virtualization software gives you the illusion that the data is all connected, but behind the scenes, it continues to exist inside of application-specific data stores. As you add more apps, you add more silos, and you use the virtualization to create that connected facade in front of that. Whereas the data fabric enables the creation of new data to be done in a way that you don't need to virtualize it because it's naturally connected. And that's really the fundamental difference here. So imagine a company of the future that never has integration, never has fragmentation, never has to make any duplication copies of data, as what data fabric does that virtualization just doesn't do. One other point of common confusion is the relationship between a data fabric and the world of data science. Obviously, there is a relationship and a link. I'll get to that in a second, but firstly, a data fabric is not a data science platform. It's not purely for enabling AI and ML. It helps with that, but it's actually for much more than that. But as it relates to AI, you have to picture AI being like a shiny sports car, but the world without the data fabric is a jungle. There's no roads, there's no gas stations, there's no infrastructure. So you have to push your car because you can't charge it or fuel it up. And you have to get out of the car and cut down the jungle with a machete. And you have to push it uphill in a jungle. And that ain't no fun. So what the data fabric is doing is it's really the infrastructure, it's the roads, it's the network that enables AI to really take off at true scale so that you can really drive that pretty cool car at full speed. So what Fabric actually is, though, is it's for building not applications, but experiences. Um, so it's a different way of building technology that essentially changes how we architect this new technology such that data and applications are separated and decoupled from each other, and data is managed as a connected network. That's ultimately the primary usage pattern of a data fabric. So it's less about it being kind of an evolution of data, and it's more about it being about an evolution of applications. So if you look at the way that we've architected applications for 40 plus years now, where we have apps, we have everything from mainframe to client server to 3-tier to n-tier to SOA to microservices, like all of these things, they're fundamentally the same. You either buy or you build. If you buy, the vendor writes code and gives you the binaries. If you build, you write the code. No matter which of those two, you have to do integration. And these applications, sometimes a company can have literally tens of thousands of applications. They sit on top of infrastructure, and for some time now, that infrastructure has been made available as a service, whether it's through VMs in a traditional data center or through an infrastructure as a service provider like an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google. So this is just how it's been. The data fabric now kicks in and really changes this for the first time in literally decades. So there's really two core usage patterns. There's the idea of augmenting your existing applications, where you have your custom apps either bought or built, and instead of doing the point-to-point integration, you're relying on the fabric to apply a network-based architecture to enabling the connectivity of data. So you're not doing incremental effort to link your HR system to your trading platform. It's everything separately connects to one thing, which is the data fabric. In the same way that computers on the internet don't connect to each other, they each connect to a network, and those networks are connected to form networks of networks. And that's how, get a new computer, attach it to your Wi-Fi network, suddenly you're connected to billions of devices and billions of people. It's that network effect that kicks in. So by applying a data fabric, you're essentially making existing applications smarter by connecting them to the fabric, because they're getting access to all the knowledge and information and capabilities that are on that fabric, which will grow and evolve over time. It's the difference between a computer that's not on a network and a computer that's on the internet. That computer, because it's on the internet, basically gets smarter every day, every time that you're using it. Not because the computer's changing, but because the internet is changing, the network is changing. So that's the first pattern. The second is really when you're going to be buying or building new applications, the option to really shortcut that and not do the full out app, but get the experience of the app so that the end user doesn't understand really the difference. They see nothing but just faster, better, cheaper delivery. So you're still building UIs or buying UIs, you're still implementing business rules. But the platform is going beyond just the data fabric to eliminate integration. And now we're getting into the idea of autonomous data that is essentially providing persistence as a service for multiple, what otherwise would have been bespoke applications. So no longer do new apps need separate databases. They can share the fabric and actually have the data be born on the fabric so that it's connected. It never needs to be integrated. It never needs to be copied. So this very much is the future of applications, this idea of experiences. And then the longer term future, if we think beyond kind of the here and now, is where data itself matures to become the actual kind of final experience. So we're doing some early work here. We use our product to run our company, so we try and live in this world. But the reality is, for the most part, organizations that are out there are going to be looking at a data fabric to augment their apps or to build new experiences. And if you look at it from a different perspective, it's the difference between data integration, where you have apps, old and new, on-prem, in the cloud, bought versus built. It's all kind of the same. You're connecting those apps to each other using APIs for the most part, for at least a number of decades now, using the evolution of service-oriented architecture, microservices. And that's a great way to avoid the copying and pasting of code. It allows one application to invoke the code of another application by simply having a pointer to it. It doesn't need to copy it. But behind that code is the data, and that's where things start to fall down. So that's where you need to do integration. And that integration can be in the form of ETLs, it can be APIs, it can be data synchronization. There's lots of different technologies, but they all have the same byproduct where you need to do incremental effort every time you want to make data available to another application, or from that application perspective, to be able to use that data from another application. And there's a whole lot of copying that takes place. Even if you're using APIs for the data integration, you're still ultimately storing the results of that. So that's the traditional point-to-point approach. You can see, in a world where there's just 4 applications, it gets very complicated very quick. And probably none of you have 4 applications. You probably all have hundreds, thousands, or potentially even tens of thousands. So the data fabric totally changes this model. It's instead of the point-to-point, it's the idea, as I mentioned earlier, where existing applications connect not to each other, but through the fabric, and then the fabric is how the data gets wired together. The introduction of the idea of autonomous data, enabling the new applications to be built without standing up new data stores. So that data can be managed on the fabric. So the fabric is your system of record for that new information. That could be new attributes, could be new data. And then as your fabric is evolving, as you deliver projects, you're gaining the data experience, which is, think of that as the generalized user interface that allows even non-technical business users to interact directly with the data. Because with Fabric, the controls are not inside of application code. They're actually in the fabric and defined at the data layer itself. So that enables you to have universal enforcement of centrally defined controls, which is game-changing. So the kind of getting to the core topic here, when you look at your target state architecture, what does this actually mean, right? So everyone has a target state. It's continuously being iterated on and evolving. So some of the best practices that we've seen in the dealings with our customers is that you should continue to use APIs and microservices for code reuse and application decoupling. It made sense decades ago. It still makes sense today, and it will still make sense tomorrow. As long as there is code, APIs is a great way. And frankly, that's one of the inspirations for how a data fabric works, because it's not copying, it's pointing, it's links, just like how APIs are essentially links, linked code. So that's the first thing to consider as your target state. So it's keep it as is. The next would be, though, to stop using APIs and ETLs for data reuse. So carrying data and replicating it over other technologies. And that's where the fabric kicks in. The fabric is your solution to avoid the point-to-point integration. The next thing to think about is people talk about data sharing in the context of it being a good thing. Reimagine that and reposition that from data sharing, where we're sending copies of information back and forth, to where we're collaborating on data, where you're providing access, you're not providing copies. So this idea of collaboration, just imagine a document collaboration platform, just as a very simple example, like a SharePoint or a Google Drive. Central platform, and it's access, not copies, and you have real-time collaboration and all these additional control benefits and efficiency benefits. So start to think about that in your target state architecture. Also, and this is critically important, is recognizing that the apps should serve the data, not the other way around. For the longest time, we've architected applications first, and then the data model is subordinate, it's secondary, it's subservient. It should be the other way around. The apps should add value between the user and the data, but the data is the king. The data is the star of the show. We should definitely consider stop adding silos, and that's where the idea of autonomous data kicks in, to avoid adding new data stores. It doesn't matter if it's relational, non-relational, on-prem, cloud. Introduction of new data stores is new data silos, therefore integration. So the idea of appless data or autonomous data, where you're benefiting from persistence as a service, enables you to avoid that, and that's how you ultimately get to that zero integration future. For existing applications, traditionally, we make changes to them until those changes become cost prohibitive, and then we discard them and rebuild them and buy new ones. With the data fabric, by connecting existing apps to that, it opens up a whole new possibility that's a lot cheaper and a lot faster. It's not always the best fit, but it definitely allows you to save a ridiculous amount of money for when the circumstances are right, where you're augmenting your app instead of replacing your app. And knowing that, again, that app is now able to get smarter and smarter over time as the fabric evolves. The other thing to think about is we really don't recommend you create a data fabric project. You shouldn't have an infrastructure build where you're spending millions in years based on some future hypothetical benefit. You want to build incrementally using the fabric to accelerate the projects. But which projects? Well, the projects that you're already going to do. You should expect instant payback. Your cost should go down, your time should go down right starting from the first project, with obviously that growing with network effects. And if it doesn't, then it's not a good fit. Don't use it, at least not for that project. Another impact to your target state is the idea of connecting your SaaS apps that are externally hosted to the fabric, where the fabric is actually persisting that data and allowing you to retain control over that data. And this is a great defense against the inevitable trap where the vendor has you locked in because they essentially own your data. It not only gives you that control over your data and avoidance of usage and consumption fees because it's your own data, it's in your fabric, the fabric that you can even put in an on-prem capacity and pay nothing to be able to interact with that. But it also allows you to have a more plug-and-play app ecosystem because even those SaaS apps are not connected to other SaaS apps. There's no tight coupling. It's indirect through the fabric for the data integration, in the same way, again, that your API integration is enabling that decoupling. So this gives you that control. And the other thing in terms of a target state is, people have long sought solutions for desktop tools and user computing, high risk spreadsheets. And the introduction of a data fabric and autonomous data really starts to simplify this such that you now have an answer. So you can use the technology to really start the democratization of builder and technology and let people kind of create, but within a controlled ecosystem where, it's equal or greater than the control requirements that would be provided through a traditional enterprise application approach. So that's the core content today. Now, I know that some of you wanted to have some visibility into our platform. So we can definitely do that in follow-on sessions as we go deeper into the subjects. Again, today's topic was really just introducing the concepts of a fabric. But if you go to our website, there's lots of videos that will demonstrate the capabilities of our platform. But I wanted to just open it up to see if anyone had any questions, and happy to take any longer questions offline as well.
Hey, Dan, I got a question to Smilka.
Yeah.
So thank you. That was good information. I guess one question I've got is, if I've spent gobs and gobs amount of money on a integrated data platform, where I'm bringing, I got a bunch of data lakes on a Hadoop. What's the difference between that and the data fabric?
Well, your data lakes generally are mechanisms for storing raw copies of data that come from systems. When you're building systems, you don't build it on your lake. So the fabric is the different way of building systems, such that if you could go back in time, you wouldn't have even needed to create a lake. Now, you can't go back in time, so you already have a lake, so you should keep it. And your future apps can have your fabric connect into your lake. But that's the difference, is the fabric is how you build business capabilities. Your lake is your raw store for ultimately curating the data to enable analytics and insights in AI and ML. So they're solving very different problems, but obviously there's a relationship between them.
Right, and you can still, so the lake could still be a component in your target state.
Absolutely, yeah. And in fact, some of our customers have used the data fabric to create application experiences to facilitate management of their data lake. Like a data lake is generally raw. You need to curate and organize that, and you want to democratize that. So, hey, guess what? You need an application for that. You want to do reference data translation, data standardization. These are all things that you would need solutions for. Well, if you need to build a solution, a data fabric enables you to do that in a better, faster, cheaper way. So it's kind of interesting that is being used to accelerate the vision of a data lake and what that ultimately realizes. But absolutely is, for any enterprise organization, quite frankly, your target state architecture will have a data lake, and it will continue to have one even if you add a data fabric to it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
So Dan, this is Sandeep. I have a question that may kind of go into your next session, but our use case right now, and I'm trying to just grasp the picture of this all right now. We have one main application that currently integrates with, I think, 5 or 6 going through our EMS hub. Now, upgrading that and putting it onto a completely different platform is where we're at right now. how would this data fabric portion work into that? Because right now the cost is ridiculous to do. And so I'm kind of looking at a different type of architecture to do this. And some of the areas are point to point. So I kind of trying to picture in my head right now how this would fit into my situation.
Yeah, so the scenario you're describing is one where you already have integrations, but the cost of a kind of BAU is prohibitively high. Is that a fair playback?
It is, and it's also integrated into our data management
Yeah,
enterprise too. So
right.
it's a bigger picture I'm trying to grasp.
Yeah, so you'd have to run the economics to see if it's a good fit, because generally the best practice is to use it where you would have otherwise built new integrations. But if you already have integrations and they're already working, obviously they're not perfect, but you have to weigh the cost of replacing that with an alternate approach, which is incremental cost versus the cost savings of what the new BAU will look like. Because the paradigm here is quite different, right? It's you're not doing point-to-point effort. Is you're basically creating that fabric in the middle. So there's going to be a refactoring work for each of these legacy integrations where you're going to map it not to the kind of structure and format of the destination system, but of a business model that you would create on the fabric. Now, the result of that is there's going to be a lot less movement of data at the end of it all. And what I would say is if you find that within that platform, you're often needing to add new integrations, then there very well could be a compelling business case to switch over to a fabric where you can do that for going forward integrations and then kind of clean up your backlog of existing legacy integrations over time. But I don't know if you would find a compelling business case of literally just replacing it pound for pound with a fabric if you already have something that ultimately is working. It's just not.
We're actually we're basically modernizing a couple of applications onto one,
Okay.
and kind of refactoring now on this new platform on how we do integration. And again, I'm not sold right now on what we're doing right now from point to point through our TIBCO queue.
Yep.
So yeah, and there's use for data all over the pipe on what we do. And I'm trying to have a central area and just to try to make things easier, more efficient is the difficult portion right now on my side.
Yeah, so if you're modernizing the applications beyond purely just the integration, then there's definitely opportunities to either augment the applications where you're adding the capabilities using the Fabric's kind of unique capabilities, or outright replace it not with another application, but with an application experience on top of the Fabric. And we'd have to get into the details of your specific project, but if you want to just reach out separately, happy to kind of spend some time and learn more about what you're trying to do and help see if it makes sense to explore it further.
Sure.
There's a lot of variables here in terms of does it make sense or not, but it definitely sounds like a good candidate for applying a data fabric.
Okay, thank you. I'll take it offline with you then.
Okay, cool, thank you. All right, any other questions? I realize we're 4 minutes over. Apologies for that. Okay. Excellent. So let me stop sharing. Joanne, is there anything else that you want to add before we close?
Just that this is an ongoing series. So next week, at the same time, you'll have our next series. We'll go a little bit deeper into some of the same topic, where Dan will just get a little bit more specific, maybe show a couple of examples. Based on some of the questions today, it might actually be helpful for us to do a couple of diagrams and show how a data fabric could fit into that and where it would be a good use case and perhaps a one that you may want to continue on your current pathway. So we can cover that off a little bit next week. Also take a moment to visit our website at cinchi.com. There is lots of extra resources there, as Dan indicated. And we will, in the next couple of weeks, also be sending out a white paper that will go into more detail and sharing those do's and don'ts as well, so that you can look at that as you build your own future state architecture. All right. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll also be sending out this recording so you can look at it later as well.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.